First off, let's get to the big news of the day. Started about 2 o'clock this morning, and the first inkling of a news story starting to break at about 4:30 Eastern Time. I got an email from both the White House and the Department of Labor indicating that a deal had been reached, a tentative agreement between the 13 railroad unions and the NCCC, which is a management group that is negotiating a contract, a multi-year contract between the unions and the 6 Class 1 railroads. And the deal was reached late last night, early this morning. The Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh, was in on the deal, negotiating with both sides. Apparently, President Biden made a phone call to the conference this morning as well to try and push it over the table. The president saying a short time ago that this is a good deal and a big win for America. The Labor Department stepped in to help avoid a potential September 16th strike at 12 midnight. It was announced that the 13 railroad unions and management had agreed on a tentative contract, and it will be somewhere in the line, and this is what we know, a 24% pay raise, immediate pay raise for the workers retroactive to 2020, and then $5,000 bonuses spread out over $1,000 increments over 5 payments over once the contract itself is ratified. There are also some other things in this deal that are very significant, and that has to do with the unions seeking a change in railroad policy to ensure that the workers can tend to medical needs when necessary without the fear of discipline, including suspension or possibly even termination. Now, we don't know the details of the contract yet. As I said, it's under wraps, but it looks as though the threat of a nationwide rail lockout, which, quite honestly, for those of us in the trucking industry and the transportation industry, a rail strike would have been devastating. As we know, our friends in the railroads carry 30% of the nation's freight. Much of it is commodities in terms of oil, also grain, other products that are critical to the operation of the country, coal as well. So a rail strike was not in anyone's best interest, but it looks as though we have an agreement, and there's more on the story. I wrote a story that just went up at ttnews.com that has many, many more details than I can give you here on the radio, but that's what we know now. Here's the other thing in terms of breaking news now at 2:07. A short time ago, Mark Willis had some more breaking news. He sat down and had a conversation with the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
Earlier today, the Biden-Harris administration announced $1.55 billion this year alone to fund projects via what is called the Infra Competitive Grant Program, which is focused on investments in highways, multimodal freight projects, and there are specific components that are associated with the trucking industry. And here to discuss it with us is the Department of Transportation Secretary, Mr. Pete Buttigieg. And Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us for a few minutes here on the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let's go into some of the specifics with this. Did the bipartisan infrastructure law increase funding for infra, and if so, by how much? Talk about that, if you will.
That's right. This is more than a 50% increase over the last round that we had. $1.5 billion funded directly through that bipartisan infrastructure package. One of the big things we were talking about last year when we were urging Congress to pass this law and bring it to was the need for improvements across our supply chains, making sure that we had better conditions in our roads and rails. And that's really the focus of this program. We had huge demand. We got applications representing, I think, about $20 billion worth of projects. And it's very competitive. We weren't able to say yes every time, but we got to say yes more than ever before, thanks to this added funding in the infrastructure package. And now we're putting it to work. This week's announcements represent the first of 5 years in this program, and just thrilled about the difference this is going to make for so many people across the country.
Outstanding. Let's talk about some of the specifics that are associated with the trucking industry and, for example, truck parking in Florida and Tennessee. Let's talk about those with the first one in Florida. What does that involve?
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time listening to truck drivers about their needs, especially as America has come to recognize just how essential trucking is and drivers are. And one of the things we hear again and again is parking. Parking's not available. Parking's not there when you need it. And this is not just a convenience issue. This is a safety issue. You know, a lot of drivers are pushed into unauthorized or unsafe areas. They're parking along ramps. Or they have to manage their hours in a way that doesn't make as much sense economically, just because you know when you're over the road that you're going to have to go out of your way to be near a stop that's actually available. So we're doing something about that with funding. In particular, out of this program, 2 awards, one in Florida on a corridor between Tampa and Atlanta off of I-4 where there's a real need. We got $15 million headed there that's going to help them construct a new truck parking facility with about 120 spaces, including electrical hookups for standby power for the refrigerated trucks and a connection into the Florida State DOT's truck parking availability system, so it's easy to know if there's a spot available. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, something similar, $22.6 million headed there in a partnership with their DOT, upgrading the ramps into the welcome centers, adding about 125 truck parking spaces and improving the bridge on I-40 there. Those are 2 examples of where we can make a direct impact on what is clearly a major issue and a shortage, and that's the availability of safe, convenient truck parking spaces for our drivers.
Talk about the collaborative partnership, say, for example, between the state of Tennessee and the state of Florida with the Department of Transportation. I would imagine really great to see that collaboration on these projects with state leaders as well. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, the way this program was designed is that communities and states come to us with their best ideas. I'm under no illusion that even though we have a lot of expertise here, no one thinks we can sit here at the DOT headquarters in Washington and think up where all the best projects are going to be. So we invite the states to come to us, the cities and other players to come to us, Port Authorities, say, here's what we need. Here's how federal dollars can help. We go through the applications. We hold them to a very, very high bar because this is federal taxpayer money we're talking about. And then when we're able to say yes, I love the ability to work with these departments, these states, often things they've been wanting to do for a long time. Just hasn't happened yet for lack of funding. And we can team up across that federal-state distinction, often across party lines, just to get something done and make things work better out there.
Talk about also the announcement about the Department of Transportation's Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration announcing more than $80 million in grant awards under the High Priority Grant Program. What does that involve with today's announcement?
That's right. So there are so many programs, it's hard to keep track of it. So in addition to this funding that we're describing now, FMCSA has its own programs to help drive innovation. There's also a program that is partnering with the states, helping them expedite the CDLs. Not lowering the standard in any way, just clearing up some of the red tape, making it easier to get the testing and the processing done. We've got a toolkit out there. So we're going to continue using every tool in our toolkit and putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to helping drivers get their job done, which is also, of course, about helping every American consumer and family get the goods that they need affordably and on time.
You have been traveling the United States, doing a lot of travel, talking with a lot of people about the bipartisan infrastructure law. What have you been hearing from folks when you get out on the road? What do you hear?
You know, what's exciting about this stage of being able to have the law passed, it's been almost a year now, is we're now talking in terms of specific projects. I'm not just describing big multi-billion-dollar programs that are going to help someday. We're starting to say, okay, here's what we're doing about truck parking in Tennessee and Florida. Here's what we're doing in Colorado to improve I-70 at a real pinch point. Here's what we're doing in New York to help their intermodal facility. I was in Texas earlier this week. We'll be in Michigan shortly. A couple weeks ago, we did a 6-state tour. Places very different from each other. That day started, the first day of that tour started in Tampa, celebrating an investment in the port there. And next thing you knew, we were in Tulsa talking about highway improvements. And later on that week, we were in Nevada looking at a facility in the desert that's going to help with rail. So all of these places around the country are very different, but they have one thing in common, which is the need for better infrastructure to help people and goods get to where they need to be. And what I'm hearing is that these investments are a long time coming. They're welcome, and also a lot of interest in getting them done swiftly so that we can all take advantage.
Mr. Secretary, we are celebrating National Truck Driver Appreciation Awareness Week, where we're celebrating truck drivers all across America. Your thoughts on truck drivers moving our freight and keeping our economy strong?
Well, we count on our truck drivers every day, whether people realize it or not. I think there's been better recognition of that in the last couple of years as the term supply chain became a household term, as we started using terms like essential workers. But truck drivers have always been essential workers, and they're workers who we count on. You can't come to work on Zoom, and they're workers who experience infrastructure as their workplace, which is part of why we're trying to improve it. So, I want to make sure truck drivers know how important they are, how appreciative we are. And I want to make sure the country knows that whether you think about it or not, every one of us counts on truck drivers for everything, from the clothes we're wearing to the food we had for breakfast to the radio or device somebody might be listening to this conversation on. Chances are it got to where it's going on more than one truck.
Thank you, sir, very much. I appreciate you joining us on the program. And again, that is Department of Transportation Secretary Mr. Pete Buttigieg. Sir, thank you very much, and let's talk again very soon.
My pleasure. Look forward to it. Thank you.